Hello, and welcome to today's webinar called Focus and Thrive, an Integrative and Functional Medicine Approach to ADHD. The information I share in this training does not replace one-on-one relationship with a qualified health professional and shouldn't be considered health or medical advice. And the unauthorized reproduction or distribution of copyrighted work is illegal. All the materials I share today are copyright The Healthy Gut Nutritionist, and I've provided sources of those images and academic research that I've referenced. So today I'm going to introduce the integrative and functional medicine model, my model, for supporting people diagnosed with ADHD or living with ADHD symptoms. So I'm university qualified. I've got a Master's of Integrative Medicine. I've also got a graduate diploma of nutrition, and I'm registered with the Institute of Functional Medicine. And I've got a very special interest in gut health, pediatrics, autoimmune disease, nutrigenomics, skin condition, mold illness, and of course, supporting people with ADHD. I'm a member of the Functional Genomics Institute and, like I said, the Institute of Functional Medicine. And I support people around the world to not only help regain their gut and their overall health, their energy, but very importantly, their confidence and often self-esteem. So ADHD, so it is a diagnosis under the DSM-5. It is a subjective diagnosis, so it's not based on biological testing. And the criteria is basically persistent inattention, hyperactivity, impulsivity for at least 6 months that's interfering with your function or your child's function and their development. Diagnosis can be very expensive, but I will say for many of my clients, it can be exceptionally validating to have someone say to them, this is what's going on for you, and that is why you show up in the world the way that you do. More people are being diagnosed with ADHD, and it's up to about 12% in children and up to 5% in adults. And we think that it's about half the children who are diagnosed in childhood carry this into adulthood. What I'm finding more and more, and I think you probably are seeing it and hearing it too, is that people are recognizing that they have ADHD traits. So today, when I'm talking about ADHD, it's not that just that diagnosis. It's also if you're saying, look, I've actually got some of these traits and symptoms. And what I suppose me and many of the other people in my community are trying to do is to help break this stigma, and really help people navigate their symptoms and be motivated to take the appropriate actions so they can thrive. And it might be you or it might be your child. We don't want you or your child growing up with this feeling of you're not worth enough, you're not showing up in the world as you are, because the facts are it's just the way that your brain is structured and we can do things to help. So with ADHD, there's inattentive, hyperactive, which can also be slash impulsive, and some people are combined. So some people have both of these traits. So inattentive is really where you have trouble organizing yourself. You might have trouble focusing. You might get distracted. You might avoid tasks that do require focus, struggle with time management, forget things, overlook things. People may think that you're making careless mistakes or taking risky behaviors, but in fact, you don't mean it. You're not doing these things on purpose. It's just how your body is. I'm recovering from pneumonia, so I may pause to cough. Yeah, I've had a very significant lung infection. So I apologize for that. Um, on the other flip side, that hyperactivity, that's where we do see, or I see, particularly in children, where people are fidgety, leaving their seat, shaking their leg while they're sitting still, that restless legs, blurting out answers, cutting into people's conversations, having trouble waiting, feeling restless, interrupting, talking excessively, always on the go. These people sometimes Parents in particular, when they're describing children, will say, oh my gosh, they've just got so much energy. And like I said, you may, or your child may fall into one category or have symptoms of one, or it may be all of it and combined. So, yeah, my apologies for my throat. What we find with adults is that they often have less hyperactivity and impulsivity. With adults, we find that they're more inattentive, and that may be because many children, as they grow up, learn to mask and develop these compensatory strategies to deal with it. Could be it. But what, like I said, is my goal is to really help people to make sure that they got the confidence and self-esteem and self-worth so they can realize their full potential. Because going undiagnosed for many people, and I hear this from my adult clients, is this sense of underachievement, or I'm not good enough, or I don't fit in, or, they've been labeled certain things through their life. And the facts are that ADHD does sit alongside, for some people, other mental health conditions. So we do see it as a comorbid condition. And that, I think, is due to how a person is supported in their life up until the point where they get that support. Females are typically underdiagnosed, so definitely in childhood, the ratio is much, much less. We see 1 to 3. Um, Whereas in adulthood, what we're finding is more and more women are getting diagnosed. And this was a research paper that was done only a couple of years ago. So, taking a functional medicine and an integrative approach, what we're trying to do is address what we call the non-negotiables. So, what are things in your life or your child's life that could be basically making things worse? And what are the things that we can add in that could make things better? And that includes going to sufficiency of some nutrients and minerals. What we also have to do sometimes is look at where there could be things going on. And I say here dismantling dysfunction, but when I say root causes, it's really looking at the roots of this tree and saying, all right, sleep and relaxation, exercise and movement, nutrition, stress, relationships, gut, genetics, what are the other factors that we really need to consider in a person who has got ADHD symptoms? It might be things like emotional and physical trauma, or it might be we need to do some things around their beliefs around themselves. It may be all of it. Often it's working across all the roots of the tree. My timing of putting the pause on is a bit hit and miss with my cough, so I apologize for that. So, look, one of the tests that I often run that can be very effective to help me get people good support with regards to their ADHD symptoms is an organic acid test. So, it's a urine test, which is very simple to do, even with children. And what we're trying to do is we're trying to see what kind of metabolites we find in that urine. So from one urine, we can find out a lot of things. So firstly, I'm trying to see, are there any yeast, fungal, bacterial overgrowth, and in particular things like Clostridia. So Clostridia can block the conversion of dopamine. So that's one thing that I'm always looking at when I'm getting this organic acid test. On that first page, are there any clues that could be impacting neurotransmitter synthesis? I'm not going to go through every area on the test, but you will see here there is a section which is also summarizing the metabolites of some of the neurotransmitters. So dopamine is a really critical neurotransmitter. So this isn't the neurotransmitter, this is the metabolite of the neurotransmitter. But what this does is gives me clues like, is it too low? Is it too high? What's the conversion to norepi and epinephrine? And that can help me understand potentially what are some things that we can do to help you to see, does it help your symptoms? Imbalances here can sometimes explain inattentive hyperactivity, poor emotional regulation. Also, things like quinolinic acid. So, if you or your child has high quinolinic acid, we've got to deal with that because that's neurotoxic and that could be playing into things. So, very, very helpful. Pardon me, I haven't spoken this much since I've recovered, so bear with me. Some of the other things that I'm looking at from an organic acid test are things like your folate and your nutritional markers like your B12 and your B6 in particular. So, understanding what's called methylation is really critically important. I'm going to cover that in a little bit as well. But you need optimal methylation to be able to produce good amounts of neurotransmitters. So, what I'm trying to work through is, are there any deficiencies that we need to address? And then also detoxification. So, what we want to understand is your body, is your child's body able to deal with the toxic load that they're faced? And we're all faced with toxins every single day in our environment. Poor ability to deal with this can result in reduced what's called glutathione, which can impair neurological health. So, overall, this is a fantastic test, and it's often the first test I run. Another one that is an option that we can look at is a hair test. So, cells make tissue, tissue make organs. And so when we think about hair, it's made of tissue. So if we cut, 1 or 2 centimeters from the scalp, it's giving us a date stamp of 1 to 2 months of what has been stored in your cell. It's very different to a blood test because a blood test is what's in my blood right now, whereas a hair test is what has my body stored in the cell. So, when we're thinking about ADHD and ADHD symptoms, where this can be very, very useful is to firstly see what is the balance of the minerals. So, if things like copper and zinc are way out of whack, then what we can do is help to gently rebalance those. And for some people, they're carrying a lot of heavy metals. And so, if there's a lot of heavy metals in there, in the body, in the cell, what we've got to do is work through, is your molybdenum and your sulfur balanced? Does it look like your detox capacity could support us shifting these? Because these can be neurotoxic. And typically, what I want to see on a hair test is them at very minimal, if not negligible, not their levels. This cadmium is through the roof. We definitely don't want to be seeing numbers like that. Another one is a gut test. So, why would we order a gut test? So, if you've got ADHD symptoms and you're constipated, diarrhea, reflux, intestinal pain, bloating, any digestion issues, we want to know, are there things in the gut that could be upsetting basically your brain health? We do know there's some good research now saying the gut and the brain, there's an axis and it's bidirectional. So this influences the gut influences the brain. So what I'm looking for is, are there any pathogens, on the front page, Helicobacter, also the good bacteria. So do you have a good balance of good bugs? Potentially you've got a dysbiosis. You've got too many bad bugs. Maybe you've got parasites or fungus or yeasts or worms. And then also looking to see what your digestion is like. So, for an example, if your elastase 1 is low or your steatocrit is high, it means you're struggling to break down your food. And at the end of the day, if you've got maldigestion, you can't break down what you're eating, supplements you're taking, and that can really impact cognitive function. So that's a real snapshot of that test. You can learn more about this test by looking at that video on my YouTube channel as well. So, nutrigenomics is a study of how food interacts with our genes. It's very new science, only been around since the 1990s. And the role of your genes, your child genes, and how it impacts your ADHD and or ADHD symptoms can be really insightful. So the thing is, everybody has genetic, it's called SNPs, single nucleotide polymorphisms. We all have these genetic changes. We think about every 300 genes, but they're at different spots. So the thing is, how do your genetic SNPs impact you and your health and your symptoms? And it's going to have a significant interaction based on your nutrition, your environment, toxins, heavy metals, mold, stress, etc. So methylation is what I briefly spoke about before, where I said on that organic acid urine test, I want to make sure your folate, your B6, your B12 are optimal. What I'm looking here when I'm thinking about methylation is, and that's where I most often always start with ADHD and ADHD symptoms, is because you need that ability of this methionine synthase to be able to come back around here to reactivate key aspects of your folate metabolism to then feed in to your ability to make dopamine and serotonin. So dopamine is here, and that norepi and epi that I spoke about before is here. Serotonin's down here. And so with ADHD, what we're trying to really work through is, is there a hole in the bucket where you're losing your dopamine too quick? And look, there's lots of holes in the bucket. Or are there potential issues with inputs? And with inputs, like I said, I'm always starting right back at the beginning at methylation. What we can do is we can understand your nutrigenomics by doing a mouth swab. And a mouth swab is easy to do for you, but also with children. That really gives us really thorough information where we can say, look, is there any clues in here as to why I show up in the world that I do, the way that I do? Now, with methylation, we're looking at quite a lot of genes. So a lot of people often talk about MTHFR, but it's only one gene. So I'm looking at it in the big scale of things. I'm also looking at that detoxification. If we have that urine test, the organic acid urine test, it makes it even more helpful to understand your genetics and go, oh, look, you've got some deletions perhaps with your ability to use glutathione. The other area I'm looking at is something called glucuronidation. So again, important in your phase 2 liver detox. Some people who have issues with glucuronidation, they're very sensitive to chemicals and salicylates and food additives and medications, fragrances, all these things which can be, basically filling up your bucket and worsening symptoms. One of the most important genes I look at is COMT, your catechol-choline methyltransferase, because that impacts dopamine breakdown. So if you're a slow COMT, you often have high dopamine in the prefrontal cortex. That often looks like anxiety, emotional intensity, sensitivity to stress. And if you're a fast COMT, that's where we see low dopamine. And that's where we often see that low focus, low motivation, sometimes even impulsivity. So it can give us some really, really good data. It also looks at things like your inflammatory status. So if you've got certain genetic propensity for your ability to, when you're inflamed, have this inability to bring it back under control, that can be really helpful for us to say chronic inflammation, even neuroinflammation, might be a thing that we've got to really keep an eye on for you. So doing the things to keep you anti-inflammatory, low inflammatory, can really help with behavioral regulation. So if any of that sounds interesting for you, you're more than welcome to jump on my website and book an appointment or book a discovery call. If you just want to have a chat, meet me in person, ask the questions, you're more than welcome to do that. So you just do that on my website. at our initial appointment, you'll get some forms to fill in beforehand. You give me copies of any testing you've done, and we'll dive deep either into your health history or your child's. And what I'll try to do is start to join the dots, and we'll work through, is there any of the functional testing I've spoken about today or any other tests useful and, might be valid to do. We often don't do them all at the one time. What I can do is help you work through, okay, where's the best place to start? But what we do in that first appointment is I give you really clear recommendations on things to try. So you can get started in the first 6 weeks while we're waiting for any tests to come back. And then at each appointment, we'll go through any tests in detail. I'll give you nutrition advice, lifestyle suggestions, supplementations that are appropriate, and if we need to do any testing. And of course, I'll answer all of your questions. So feel free to jump on the website. Like I said, you're more than welcome to book a free discovery call. Or if you feel like I've answered enough today, just jump on and book an appointment. I've got an online clinic. Like I said, I see people all around the world by telehealth. If phone is better for you, we can do phone, or you can check on my website about my clinic locations, and you're more than welcome to come and see me in person. So I hope that's been useful for you today. If there's anyone that you think would get benefit out of this webinar that I've shared today, please share with them. I'd love you to spread the word. All right, have a lovely day, and until next time, speak to you soon.